I'm Hal, and John and I built this hoist for storing the top to my antique Mercedes convertible. It's a 1985 380 SL, and it has a hard top that I rarely use, so I wanted it out of the way. And we're going to show you how the hoist works. Today is not only hot, but it's raining a lot, so I don't know whether we'll be able to pull the car in and show putting the top on the car. But there's been videos and a lot of instructions on how to put the top onto one of these cars and how to remove it, so that's not as important. Now, first we're going to start with a look at the lift itself, which is here. And as we pull out, you can see the lift with the car in it, or with the car top in it. And we're going to show you the different parts about how it works and what's put together. Okay, right behind me, just so it's not confusing, is the step up to the attic in the garage. And the only reason I'm pointing that out is it's so close to this that I want to make it clear that it's not related, it's not part of it. This is a small garage built in the 1940s for different size cars, and people weren't working on them in the garages as much then, apparently. We have 4 cables like this, one connected to each corner. And on each corner we have this piece of metal that it's just flat under here and joined and curves up, and John had a lot of fun bending these and curving them up. And this cable is connected indirectly to a hoist, and we'll get to that, but the 4 pieces are held up right here. And when it's in resting position, we leave it a little lower so that there's not as much tension on the cable, and the chains hold the tension, and this piece can detach. We'll show you that in just a second. The first thing I have to do is tighten up the hoist. Now John, the camera's going to move a bit because John's stepping over to the hoist control right now, and he's going to pull it up and tighten it. So as he does this, you're going to see it tighten just a little bit. And you can see this loose now. Now we would do this on all 4 corners. We're only showing one. And as he comes in, it's just undoing this like that. And then I just put this back in here so I don't lose it while it's down. And we're going to do this with the other 3 of these. And then this will be ready to move down. Alright, we've loosened these. As I said, we're keeping these in because we don't want to lose it. I'm going to show you real quickly. This is a small carabiner, and it's rated at, I believe, 440 pounds because we had to worry about the weight of this and the weight of the top. And it goes from here up to a pulley. And you can't see it. Don't worry about this wire. That's for something else. You can't see it from here, but I'll show you in just a minute. It goes from here to another pulley. Now, as we zoom out and get the whole top of this whole section here, left and right, you can see that other side that I was at just a minute ago. It's got a wire that comes along. Now, of course, the wires or cables each go on a little bit of a different path, but then they all come together at one point. And this is where I'm going to share a few very key lessons with you that we learned. 1, do not use rope. Don't even think of using rope for 2 reasons. 1, rope stretches so much that it makes any calculations you do about the length and anything totally worthless. 2, rope is twisted together, and when you untwist it, or when you pull it tight, it untwists. The rope will not only stretch, and I don't have quite the strength, the human doesn't have quite the strength to stretch as much, but as it gets pulled tight, it wants to straighten out or unravel like this and get as straight as possible. And that creates a lot of other problems. It created problems with us with the part of the actual cable connector, the hoist flipping over and such. So don't even think of using rope. We used, it was either 3mm or 1/16 inch 3mm cable. Okay, we have 4 pulleys here, and I'm going to get out of the way so you can see that. Don't worry about this extra cable if you can see it behind. But we have 4 pulleys, and what we have is all 4 of the cables from each corner of the hoist, or the lift, actually the lift at this point, come together here. This is where they meet, and then they go back this way. And as John follows that back, you can see eventually that they all come together at one point. I can't get up there and you don't need to see me, but these are the 4 cables coming together to these 2 connectors to a carabiner, and we had to actually use 2 to make it fit to the hook. This is very important. Notice that we have a frame here that is made out of angle iron, and I use smaller angle iron, and it bent. So this frame is reinforced, and we have this connector. Now notice the cable comes from here to this pulley and down to here. That may seem extra, and you may look at it and say, well, why didn't this wire come just around here into the hook? The reason for doing this is to do 2 things. One, it cuts the speed of the hoist in half so that the wire is moving slower, the platform is dropping slower, and also when we use the same connection to raise or lower the top off my car, it's moving at a slow rate. That means that I actually have control over it. Now this cable goes from here around through here and back along here, and as John follows that, I need to lower the garage door. And this cable comes along to here. Here's a hoist. And notice that we have this thing again where the cable comes out here. Instead of going to this hook, it goes to a pulley and it's fastened back. It's the same arrangement we had over at the other end of this cable, where it gets, it basically doubles the lifting strength of the hoist by doing this, and it cuts the speed in half. So as this comes out, if you pay more attention to this cable, and it's hard to see it, but as that comes down, and you watch the speed there, that seems fast. This comes down much more slowly than the hoist is moving. The actual lift or platform goes down slowly. It's not as important with the platform to move slowly as it is for the top to move slow when we lift it off the car or put it back on the car. But since we're connecting to the same cable each time and only using one connection, both of them deal with that. There's a little bit of shaking here, and I'll explain that later. This is webbing, holds a hell of a lot, and the other advantage is I can use this on something like the top to my car without it leaving marks that ropes will leave. And what we normally do at this point with the top is we use the webbing to make a cradle. I'm not going over that because I've talked about that before in a blog entry that I'm going to link to. But what we do is we put the webbing around the top to hold it, and it gives us one ring up. And then if you come over to here, this ring runs to a cable that right now is tied off, but what I can do is easily hook it to the carabiners that we showed you earlier coming from the hoist. That lets a hoist control this. We run this down to the top and to the webbing, and then we can pull the top up, and we easily swing the top over off the hoist, and then we can put the top down, lift the top back up and get it out of our way, and then pull the car, and then we have to lift the top again. It's actually a multi-step procedure. It does take time. Getting the top off of a Mercedes 380 SL is easy, but the way we're doing it, yes, it's more difficult because we're doing extra stages. We have to get it off the lift, and then once off the lift, we have to move the lift back up, and then we have to hook the hoist back connected to the lift and lift the top up so that we can drive the car under it. It's a little bit extra work, but with the extra storage issue and resolving that and getting it out of the way, that's no problem. Now I'm going to go over just a little bit before we show this moving up, which is easy. If we look back at the whole thing, we can see right here that there's screening. If you've ever stored a top like this before, then you will have dealt with bugs getting in the top and falling in between the rear window and the section there and dying. If you've done a lot of work to restore your car, it looks really ugly when you're driving down the road and people see bugs in the back of your car. So the screening was not much extra in price, and it was pretty easy to do. And then we actually nailed the molding around the edges so that no bugs could get in through the edges of the screening to basically make this bug proof. Alright, all we have to do to pull it back up is press a button. And all that work of lifting the top is made easy. Okay. Alright, in just a minute we're going to start it again. Notice that this is cut. John did a real good job at figuring this out. We were having problems with this lining up. And this is cut right here so that when this is coming up, if this isn't hitting correctly, it'll hit this angle and go into place. Alright, so as we finish bringing it up, you can see that there's always some leeway. It always goes back and forth a little bit, but this makes sure that it goes up in there. Okay, now the last step is we take these again and just run it through that hole and tie it in. And when we're done, we'll let the slack of the wire out a little bit. There's a number of reasons I don't want the wire to stay tight when it's in storage. One is it can stretch wire a little bit. Two, in case something goes wrong with the hoist, or Junior comes in, or somebody else comes in and starts playing with the hoist, you really don't want this dropping down. Normally my car is parked right under here. It's fully restored, and the last thing I want is for somebody to accidentally hit a button and for this to drop on a fully restored antique car. Another point right here, this is the extra ring that I was talking about. This cable can connect to the hoist cable. Remember when I showed you the two carabiners together? This cable could hook up at the other end right there, and that's what we use for raising and lowering the top itself. Okay, it's right nearby, and it's a cable that you saw in some of the earlier shots, and I really am just not going to demonstrate it because I've got a completely restored top and I want to handle it as little as possible, and I don't want to have the top going onto the car up and down any more than I need to, because every time I do it, even if I know what I'm doing, I'm risking scratches. Now there's a couple mistakes we made in this, and if we had already made one of these or worked with ropes and cables and such a lot, we would have known about this. If I were to do it over again, I ran into a problem. You had that cable running from behind where you're standing now all the way along the length of the garage to the front. This is a long run of a cable, and we found out that when that's pulled back and forth, there's always some vibration in it. And that's because it's horizontal. You want the cables to go vertical, but we didn't have enough room in here. There's an attic up above. I could have run it up through there. The other one is, you see all these four corners. And this created a problem because we had four cables that had to be tied together with one. If I had to do it all over again, I would do it completely differently. If you look at any box, and I have one of a toy that's been sitting around here. If you look at any box, we stored it this way. It should have been stored this way, which is the way the stand would store it if I put it on the regular stand. That was one of the pieces that was that's on the lift with the top. And what I would have done is I would have stored it in a box like this. I'd had a cable in each corner, and they would come up and joined right above it, only a foot or so above it. And I would have cut a hole in part of the attic floor, reinforced it with some extra joists, and I would have had it go right up there. That way all the cables for lifting would have run vertically, none of them would run horizontally. I would have still been able to reclaim the space. So that was a small mistake, and that's why you get some vibration. Now, as John shows you this, and you can see it, I'm going to step out of the way, and it gives you an idea of just what it looks like. And then we'll show you a shot at the end of this with the car parked in place. I'm 5'9", and this is about 6 inches above my head, and it will give most people clearance, so it's completely out of the way. You don't have to worry about bumping into it and you know, bumping heads. Okay, as you can see with the car in place, that is over top of it. Of course, that would terrify some people. But John and I went over all the numbers and everything on this extremely carefully, and it is safe up there. It fits over the hood, and it's completely out of the way.